Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Hey, this is Ellen coming to you from the tropical island of St. Barts, and you are listening to Light Talk.
And this is your old friend Stan in Gainesville, Florida. And today we're talking about business decisions, focus priorities, tungsten trash, succession planning, all on Light Talk with the Lumen Brothers.
And sister.
Whoa, welcome to episode 393 on our way to 400.
Wow.
Ellen and Stan, do you have any updates or industry news for our listeners?
I bet Ellen does.
I actually do. I have two things. One is anyone who's listening who needs a free Expo Hall pass to LDI in Las Vegas in December, use promo code LIGHTTALK, LIGHTTALK, all one word in caps, when you go to register at www.
Can you repeat that? It didn't sink into my head.
It's Light Talk, LIGHTTALK, at www.ldishow.com, and you pick Expo Hall Pass, which is right now selling for $99, and you get one for free.
It's such a deal.
It is a deal because not only does it include the Expo Hall, but there are 3 new technology breakfasts. The awards ceremony is now going to be a breakfast on Tuesday. There's a party, the Crew and Connect party, that comes after the big Battle of the Busk show. So there's a lot of stuff included with this that's not just visiting the Expo Hall floor. So it's definitely a deal.
And we get our name attached to it. And I have a little piece of industry news, but I can't reveal it all because I don't have the security clearance, other than to say that we've joked in the past about a Light Talk event happening in the Faroe Islands, but we were unable to get visas to the Faroe Islands. But we are going to be doing something out of country. Just stand by.
Woohoo! I better get my passport. Anyway, the other little piece of news is, I don't know if you remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked about that giant stadium that they built in Munich for Adele. It was a bespoke sort of stadium, and it was really high-tech and fabulous. Well, this isn't the same exact thing, but Live Nation has just announced the construction of a new seasonal stadium in the north end of Toronto, Canada, on the site of an old airport, and it will seat 50,000 people. And their goal is that it will make sure that major concert tours can come to Toronto. So let's keep an eye on what's going to be going on north of the border.
That's amazing. I mean, you think about their own stadium. They sell the tickets. They book the acts that they control. This is going to be just a mega venture. And if it works here, they'll probably do it around the world.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's like, why rent a space if you can have one of your own?
Exactly. So I'm sure people will have some pros and cons about that we'll be hearing about. Well, Stan, I think you have our first question.
Morgan in Toronto asks, when preparing to go in to focus your show, do you have a kind of a thought process about what's a priority, what you have to have in order, the kinds of things that are really top of list for getting ready to go into the dark and point the lights in the right place?
Go ahead, Stan.
Oh, I have to answer it? I thought I just had to ask it. Well, I don't know. I know for me, when I was doing theater, I would really want to have my ducks in a row about my channels. So I really want to have it in my head almost about what I know my systems are, the range of the numbers so I can call for them quickly. I want to make sure that if I'm using filters, all the filters are organized to go up in the bucket with the electricians. I also think about the order in which I want to focus things, particularly around scenic elements that are not just kind of generic washes, which ones I want to do and how I want to do them, how I'm planning on maybe the edge of my gobos. But now with automation, it might be a whole different kind of way of thinking about, I like to have the console organized so the electrician or the console operator can access things quickly. And I like to see if I can get everybody into a rhythm. Particularly, I kind of use this old New York method. Like, it shouldn't take more than 60 seconds on a fixture If you want to be in and out and in a minute on one fixture, and if possible, work with my board operator to sort of be able to step through stuff quickly and get the lights on, get them off, get them glowing. What my methodology is. That's what comes to mind for me right now, Morgan.
I'm in my dotage here. I'm working with the luxury of almost all moving light rigs these days. But if I do have kind of a mixed rig, the way I start is the day before focus, I chat with the production electrician, and I say, is there how would you like to approach focus tomorrow? And 9 times out of 10, they go, whatever you want. But I always go through that courtesy, and they may have a good point of why we need to start somewhere first. But I always check with them. Generally, I will start with the difficult stuff first. So if it's going to be a contortion of electricians, or they're squeezing into some spot, or scenery is in the way, I do the hard stuff first while they're fresh, rather than waiting to the end of the day. As far as the geography of the stage, just over the years, I've fallen into the habit of starting at the back of the stage and working my way forward. Electricians, you might find an electrician who is just incredibly generous with their time, but most electricians want you to start at the end of one pipe and work your way down that pipe. So they really don't want to drive the genie lift all over the stage and walk several miles they don't have to walk that day. The one thing that I would suggest that would make your focus more productive is cleanup is about half an hour before end of day. So your cleanup is at 4:30 for a 5 o'clock walking out the door. At 4 o'clock, I stop the focus, and the electrician and the board operator, I go through all the lights that have been focused fairly quickly to see if we've missed something, like all of a sudden there's a shutter on a leg somewhere, or we just somehow missed that light and it's not focused. So we take some notes, and those are the first things we correct the next morning to make sure that our focus is solid before we start focus day 2 on it. But that's just, generally how I work.
I have a question for you, Steve, because you mentioned that, and I think I alluded to it as well, that now we have a lot of automated rigs. Do you have a sort of a priority or a focus philosophy preparation sense as you're going in to get to build your palettes, which is essentially your focus palettes, same kind of thing?
Well, as you mentioned it, I'm doing an all-moving light show right now in a theater space, and the 2 electricians, while we're sitting here, have my color palettes, and they are building the color palettes into the show that I will check. It's what, 4 o'clock-ish here. Our end of the day is 6. So when this is over, I'll go down and check color palettes and see what I have to tweak myself. And they've already built focus palettes for me that I've got mapped out.
Do you use that mix book thing where you check, you can actually export the data? Like, I'm curious, because I did a similar thing where I created images for my programmer for colors. I took a rendering of the building, I colored it, and I didn't really give them any RGB or any specific gel or data by which they could mix to, but I gave them a visual and said, make things that look like this. What was your process?
I do use Mixbook, and it becomes like a kind of encyclopedia of color for me, because it is useful to pull up some information and throw it in the board. But there are going to be people clutching their pearls right now, unless you are at least 50 years old. I have to admit, I still take a piece of gel. I take 2 movers, and I aim those movers on some surface coming at me. So if I'm on the orchestra pit, then they're focused a few feet in front of me on the orchestra pit, but the light's coming in my direction. They both go to white. I take a piece of gel or a swatch book, and I put it over my right eye, and then I just dial in the left white fixture so it matches what I'm seeing through my right eye.
Interesting.
It's an old rock and roll trick. Works. It's once you start doing it, it's very fast. And
then do you save that as as a base for that color?
Yeah. But so if I were mixing, special lavender, then I would have the two lights, special lavender over my right eye, dialing in the white fixture that I'm looking at to try to match that. And yeah, once I had that, I would save that as a palette. The thing is everybody's color temperature is slightly different. Everybody's fixture is slightly different. I don't know. I'm sure there are people out there who can call in and say, well, you idiot, this is how I do it. I think just the pre-selected kind of color stuff doesn't really work. Sometimes it works and that's great. But I'm skeptical about it because of all the information the console has to kind of weed out. Is it a high-end fixture? Is it a Martin fixture? Is it a Verilight fixture? And they're all. Is it CYM or RBG? Is it an ARC or is it an LED? There's so much that console has to compensate for.
So if you mixed your special lavender with all the different fixture types till they all looked as uniform as your please with their uniformity, would you then merge that data into a palette so no matter which fixture you get, you're going to still come up with, the same special lavender, even though it's going to be slightly different for each manufacturer, but your palette should be able to do that by merging it. Yeah.
And let me say, I'm not trying to match Roscoe's special lavender. I'm trying to get in the zone of what I think it needs to be.
Right.
Then I have to go back. Well, first of all, right now I'm not mixing equipment. I don't have I'm a Verilight guy. In this particular show, though, I'm using all high-end fixtures. So I'm not trying to tell the high-end fixture and the Verilight to match each other. Mm-hmm. If I did, they're not going to. So then I've got to go back and tweak one or the other to come.
But you're exclusively high-end on this particular project.
All high-end on this project.
Right.
They're both. I mean, I think, my grandfather once told me to eat the dog food I bring. And, for people who don't know what the heck that means, it means that high-end high-end is down in Austin. They're a Texas company. They do some work up in Yankee World, but they are Texas, born and bred. And Verilight is Texas, born and bred. And I want to keep the money in the city. I want to keep the money in the state. I want to keep the money in the region. And they both make fantastic equipment.
Just as an aside, high-end belongs to ETC now.
Well, that's those Yankees they work with.
The Wisconsin connection.
You get a Lightner's cheese all over it.
Put your cheese on your barbecue, baby.
Cheese heads for high-end.
I like barbecue with cheddar.
Ugh.
That's pretty good, actually.
Well, I have to
kosher.
say, I had never had a cheese curd until I went to Wisconsin, and those darn things are addictive. They are really good. Anyhow, maybe ETC will bring some cheese curds to LDI if you're listening. So, Ellen, I think you have our next question.
I do. Kay from San Francisco wants to know, as a freelancer, should I set up an LLC, an S-Corp, or try to join a lighting firm or collective?
Where is Ethan Steimel when you need him?
Yeah, really.
Hey, I know a little bit about this. Okay, so we have an LLC. We've had it since 2012, I think. So it's been around for a while, about 12 years. And it's not hard to do.
When you say we, who's we?
SKD,
okay.
My consultancy is an LLC. We were for a period an S-Corp. And so I can tell you why we dropped the S-Corp designation. And we did not join the collective, although we probably would if the opportunity was there and it made business sense. But the LLC is very easy. You just get on the IRS website, ask for the LLC form, fill out the form, pay your $20 or whatever it is, file it. Now, you're supposed to have a corporate charter to do that, but you don't need to.
Hold that thought. Can you explain briefly S-Corp and LLC? What do those letters mean?
Yeah, so LLC is Limited Liability Corporation. And an S-Corp, I don't know what the S stands for, but it's a standalone corporation. It doesn't have shareholders or anything like that. So, and the big difference is if you don't have full-time employees and everybody who helps you with your project, let's say it's just you, and they're not on the payroll, and you're not contributing to their Social Security or their Medicare payments, you don't want to be an S corp. There's no need for it, right? Because you have to file taxes monthly, right? If you're an LLC, the recommendation is that you file estimated quarterly taxes every 3 months, so it's much easier. And so there's a lot less compliance issues for the LLC.
I think something you just said is not true, though, because when you look up S corp, it says it's a tax classification made by companies that allow income and losses to be passed through to the shareholders. Right. But you said there were no shareholders.
No, the opposite. I assume the opposite. The LLC.
Oh, the LLC has no shareholders.
That's what I was saying. In an S corp, you're actually really are a corporation, and you've got to keep a balance sheet. You got to report to other owners, right? And so we were initially told by an accounting person to do an S corp, but it was a mistake. And then we switched accountants, and the other guy says, you don't need to file as an S corp, right? You don't have to show profit and loss. You don't need you. So we are actually. This is what I would recommend to. What's our questioner's name? And
if you're 27 years old, you just walked out of grad school, what's your recommendation then?
LLC, okay, and as a pass-through to your personal return. You do not have to file a separate return. All the money comes through to you, shows up on your 1040 form as a pass-through or disregarded entity, and you can deduct the expenses to run your LLC on your personal taxes. That's how we've been doing it now for about 8 years, and it's been good for us.
And I guess, completely separate, if David were here, he would also recommend, as a freelancer, taking out some type of insurance liability on a show-to-show basis.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
We have professional liability, which is different than, we have general liability and professional liability. Maybe I should say briefly. General liability is easy to get. It covers a lot of general things. We have professional liability, which is not so easy to get, and that covers errors and omissions, and we have to have that for what we do. But for stage work, I don't think you need that. And it was not so easy to get because you have to substantiate that you've been doing it for so long.
What about joining a collective? Are there advantages, maybe you could buy into a health insurance policy?
Yeah, that's probably a good point. I can't speak to that because we haven't done that, so I don't know. But probably yes. If you've got a dozen people working together, you can probably get a good deal on group health insurance and retirement plans. I'm just imagining that there would be benefits to that. Yeah.
I know there are lighting firms that are like that. It's like a bunch of independent designers who kind of come together to pool their resources.
There's a lot of ways you can get efficiencies that way, even sharing, data, cloud services, computers. I could imagine sharing the rental costs for a studio if you're all in the same place. Yeah, absolutely. I could imagine that would be great.
So as an LLC, you're still paying your own Social Security?
Yes. So here's what would happen. In her case, she would be an employee of her LLC. But whether or not you want to have payroll taxes deducted is a question best posed to your accountant at your individual situation.
The other information that I have to pass on to her is, as a freelancer, if you aren't in a company, clearly there's no company match 401k or anything. So just like you would have to pay double for your Social Security because you're paying both sides, pay double for your retirement because nobody's matching you, and start as early as you can.
Absolutely. Here's an interesting tax point. So we are limited on how much you can contribute to a traditional IRA, which is good for cash flow when you're young. You don't want to just do a Roth because then you still got to pay taxes on your earnings. However, you can set up something called a SEP, an SEP, self-employment pension. And what's good there is you can put in, I think it's up to 25% of your gross, of the company's, the LLC's gross income, up to $45,000 a year. And it does reduce your tax liability for that year. So we've been putting money into a SEP for me as long as I can think of since we've had my little LLC.
If you're probably walking out the door, though, I mean, you probably are making 50 or 60,000 a year. It's unlikely. There are certainly people who do, but if you got that diploma in your hand, you're walking out, you're freelancing, you're probably $50,000-$60,000 range.
Yeah, that traditional IRA is probably adequate.
Yeah, somebody talked today about something called an Acorns account, where apparently when you use a credit card, and I'm not sure if it's any credit card or one that's attached to something else, they round it up to the nearest dollar.
I've heard of that.
And it goes into your Acorns account, and every time they get $5, they invest it. And somebody said they never paid any attention to it. They signed up for it. And then like a year or two later, they got a thing that said, hey, you've got $10,000 in your Acorns account. Would you like us to roll it over into this, that, or the
fantastic.
other thing? And they're like, wow.
That's fantastic.
So it's like
that's why
investing.
Yeah, absolutely.
The 40-year-old Kay will thank the 27-year-old Kay if she takes this advice.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And not to promote another podcast, but you've mentioned Ethan a few times. These people should definitely listen to Artistic Finance. Not that Ethan is the end-all and be-all answer either, but a lot of the people who are on there can share their personal experiences, and a lot of it hits home.
But if we talk about Ethan enough, he's going to feel shamed into buying us a beer in Las Vegas.
We love Ethan.
I bet he will. He'll buy us a beer in Vegas.
Well, in case you were wondering, today Light Talk is sponsored by
Bad Hombre Stage Productions. Well, it's October again, and that means Halloween is upon us. Can it be Halloween, though, without a smoke machine? Of course not. That is why Bad Hombre Stage Productions introduces Puff, the Magic Dragon Fogger, an easy-to-use liquid nitrogen consumer-grade fogger. Just plug in the pressurized liquid nitrogen, and you can have thick clouds of smoke. Best of all, you can freeze and shatter a candy apple, a trick-or-treater's feet, or even the neighborhood feral cat. I know what you're thinking. Puff the Magic Dragon must be expensive. Well, it is. But with this machine and plenty of cryogenic gas, think of the possibilities. Are faithful old Spot and Miss Whiskers too old to play catch or take those long walks? That's right. Freeze them and revive them later when science catches up and they can have a good long extended life. What about Grandpa and Grandma? Are they slowing down too? Can't drive themselves to the store anymore? Are their days numbered? You can freeze them and revive them when medical science catches up. Order now, and we'll throw in the Weasel in a box that has a hole in one side for your hand to fit in. Inside the box is a candy treat and a very angry weasel. When the little goblins show up at your door, just offer the Weasel in a box. That's right, dearie. Just reach in and grab the candy before the weasel chews off your thumb. Parents love it. Weasel in a box makes Halloween memories that last a lifetime. And you can use Weasel in the box at Thanksgiving. Your drumstick is in the box, sweetie, or Christmas. The fruitcake is in the box, honey, or New Year's Eve. Your champagne is in the box, lover. With just a little planning, you can use Weasel in the box year-round. Bad Hombre Stage Productions. No treats, only tricks this Halloween. That could be a T-shirt that we have. I mean, that's our swag. That is our swag for LDI. T-shirts that say, feed the weasel.
And now, back to Light Talk.
Well, those lovable little hipster monkeys having their frappuccino down at the coffee shop reminds us that, once again, it is time for Let's Talk About. And today, let's talk about institutional loss. What happens to the knowledge when a senior partner, a tenured faculty member, or a highly skilled production member retires or moves on to a new job? What is the true loss to the former employer, and how do we keep that from happening?
Well, it's interesting because in my case, I started working for LDI when it was founded in 1980. 1988 with Pat McKay, who has since moved on. She sold her company, and it has been the property of various media companies ever since, mergers and purgers, and then finally, at 2019, an actual sale to a different company. And in a way, I am sort of a repository for a lot of old information. But on another side of it, a lot of people just don't care. You know, it's like they do it their way. And in the trade show business, it's like, well, they don't really, a lot of them are, I mean, I don't mean to say this negatively about these big media companies that own trade shows, but they're more interested in mining the data of the people for marketing purposes afterwards than they really are about the particular industry that the show is in. So those of us who are on the live design side, like Marion Sandberg and Hannah Kinnersley and myself, we really tried to, you know, keep up the industry knowledge flowing on our side and be like an archive for the industry. But sometimes, like, our website transfers over from one company to another. And in the last major migration, it was a massacre. They lost every video and every photograph that had just about been posted, which means that if we go back to a story where it says, you know, Jennifer Tipton speaking at the live design masterclasses or the Broadway lighting masterclasses, the story is there, but the video is lost. And there have been so many different people over the years that nobody knows where the original files are anymore, which is kind of tragic. Also, Pat saved everything, every light plot, every photograph, everything that came her way in these massive filing cabinets. There were walls of them in our old offices on Fifth Avenue, and we moved some of it when we moved to 18th Street. And when we moved out of there, the edict was you can't bring anything. You have one filing cabinet in the new offices, and that's it. So I tried to save a lot of it in boxes at a friend's lighting company. Unfortunately, they had a flood, and those boxes became, you know, useless. And all that stuff, I returned most of the photographs to the photographers because in those days they were stamped on the back, you know, property of. They didn't really belong to us, so we couldn't really use them again anyway without permission. But a lot of those notes and light plots and interviews and old magazines, and it was an incredible archive, but the world moves on, and unless somebody's specifically looking for that information, which is why I think it's really important that a lot of people in our industry have written books and are writing books and update their books, the Richard Pilbrow books, the Clifton Taylor book. And I think a lot of those are a body of information that create a succession plan, as it will. You can always go back and see what those designers said and did historically.
You know, I think it's interesting. There was some science fiction movie a few years ago where something was happening in space, and they had to bring in some engineers who were in their 80s to be able to solve the problem because of the equipment that was being used. And that mirrors real life. I just read an article, and I don't know if it was a Voyager 1 or a Voyager 2, but they've been out there for a while. NASA was having a problem, and they brought back 3 or 4 people who were still alive, who had built Voyager, and they came in and solved the problem very quickly because that was old information that no one ever thought they would need again. But there was no like owner's manual for Voyager that was developed.
And Voyager has run like so much longer than they expected. It's had this incredible lifespan, right?
But I thought that was interesting. You need really good leadership to do this because it is difficult. All of a sudden you have a turnover, whether it's from retirement or a turnover because people are moving on with their careers and they're going from one business to a bigger job in another business. But you bring in new people, and this is how the world is. Someone less experienced comes in, and they start semi at the bottom, and they start working themselves up, and they want to make their mark. They want to show that they can be a future contributor into the business, and they don't really want an owner's manual of how something was done 25 years ago. It's difficult.
Until they need the information.
Until they need the information. And they don't even know where to look for it, and no one else does. And, you hear this line like, well, Cynthia was in charge of that, and once Cynthia left, I don't know what we do. Well,
they try to figure out why the ice ages happened. And there's all these different theories. But now there's a new theory. And that what happened is they think it wasn't, the sun being blocked out by an asteroid or all those other theories. What they think now is what happened is that ice built up in certain regions of the world, layer by layer, thin little layers of ice every year in some parts of the world. And that ice stayed longer and longer in those regions and didn't melt when it warmed up. And it wasn't the ice. It was the fact that the ice radiated the heat of the sun, reflected it back outwardly to the atmosphere. Right? So, and the point is that we're making this argument from an investing standpoint, to go back to our earlier conversation. Just think about this. Warren Buffett made most of his huge gains after he was 60, years old, because each year a thin layer of ice, adding a little more, adding a little more, adding a little more, until that ice got so thick that it was radiating so much wealth. So now it's on its own. It just keeps going. And I think the same way about institutions. It's not that you want to keep everything, but you want that ice to build up layer after layer. That includes people's knowledge, the valuable stuff, so it doesn't just crack and melt and go away. That the institution can then continue to radiate and grow because it has accumulated a thicker layer of ice rather than a thin one that when the new person steps on it, it just cracks, right? Just to use a visual way of thinking about it. So I don't know. I think it's something that, there's something to be said for fresh eyes. Absolutely. But I will tell you this, that I'm having lunch on Friday with the fellow who took my job. And he happens to come from a non-American culture. And the response has been such good medicine for me because he said, you built this place. I want to know what you did and how you did it and what's important. And I think certain cultures honor that and certain cultures don't.
Well, that's very flattering.
It is very flattering. But it's not about that. It's about if you were really committed to building an institution or a theater or a business, whatever it was, and you'd like it to live beyond you. There's this conversation about, in CEO world, about there's the CEO who you bring in to quickly do something, solve a problem, and then they move on. And that business usually doesn't last, okay? It's a flash in the pan. But the CEOs who come and stay and are committed to its success, even after they're gone, become a repository and supportive. So it did mean a lot to me for that response, because I want to give back. And I don't want to take over. I don't want to have, it's theirs now. It's their watch, but it becomes useful to in whatever way you can be useful. And I think it's short-sighted when we don't take advantage.
It's kind of sad or frustrating when you watch younger people reinventing the wheel when you have been through that a couple times and you could sort of smooth the way.
Right. They could do so much more because of the layers of ice, because they allow the radiation, everybody's putting down their layer of ice, and that makes the bedrock of a great company. And there are lots of examples of that. Apple's a good example. There are lots of examples of that in the corporate.
Well, you look at Yale. Michael Juergen just retired, and the program didn't fall apart. It was on those thin layers that it's been built, and it can stand on its own. And they take all that knowledge and incorporate it. There are those programs out there. When Doc leaves, they're back to the Stone Age, trying to figure out what this man or woman did for 30 years. And, it's tricky. It's tricky at best. So how do you, again, you have to find that balance, as you say, of what is going to be discarded and what is going to be kept. Well, I think I have the last question. Well, this comes from Minnesota and some gentleman by the name of Randall. And Randall says, what can I do with all my conventional tungsten lights? Is there not room in education to keep using them? No. So, I mean, I hear your pain, Randall. You've got a couple hundred lights, and it took you a long time to get them, and the dean is saying we can't afford to replace them, make them work. You're not doing anybody any favors. We converted one theater, and no, we're not rich. We're not rich. We converted one theater to all full color LED fixtures. We took 235 lights out and put 85 in, and the students get 80. We keep 5 back as spares. But I'm seeing shows that are really spectacular because those 80 lights can do anything their imagination has in the way of color. I'm not suggesting they're all ready for a Tony Award, but the world has changed. There's new ways to light things. I'm sure someone somewhere said, do we really have to use a 2-scene preset board? This auto transformer is just fine. Do we really need to use a computer? My 2-scene preset is just fine. And it is just fine. And maybe if you are in a quasi-professional theater, maybe your argument for holding on to those tungsten lights holds some weight. But if you're in a university environment, and you say, is there not room in education? I would say no, there's not room in education because you're training that next generation of designers, and you need to at least have some equipment there that they're going to see when they go into the field. Even if it's 5 lights, you've got to start somewhere and give them the tools they need to succeed. And my friend, tungsten is not it anymore.
Well, I have a question. Is there a little storefront downtown theater someplace that has, 4 old tungsten lights and would be happy to adopt more because that's all they can afford? And if you give it to them,
maybe,
they like
but
them.
I mean, I'm working with Rob Crane at ETC to refit a theater, and we are slowly, we just, 30 lights maybe. We just retired 30 tungsten lights and put 30 LEDs in. Phase 2 is to get rid of all the cyc light and put cyc lights in, and phase 3 is to grow those 30 lights to about 50. And, it's anybody who wanted them could have them, but it was surprising because some of them we just can't get a lamp for anymore. We just cannot get that lamp, and so no one wants them. So, everybody goes, oh, well, let's anything that was kind of Source 4-ish, people grabbed, but anything that wasn't, people didn't grab.
I want to say something about this notion. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that people were saying exactly that to me, Steve, that what are you doing buying all these fancy lights for these people? These people aren't going to see that when they go out there into the world. You got to still teach them this or that. And I went, really? Is that preparing them for the future? I mean, it just made no sense. I'll give you an example. I think it's over 10 years ago we did a high school, and this was on the rigging side. And it was the first high school in Florida that actually we put automated rigging in. And it had a fly system. And they said, we think there's still a lot of manual fly systems out there. Are we going to cheat the students if we don't teach them that too? Because there's a lot of safety involved and so on. And I said, 10 years ago, that makes sense. So what did we do? We left 2 line sets upstage, like for the psych and maybe a backdrop manual. And the rest of it we replaced with automation. And then fast forward 5-6 years from that, we did a big roadhouse, and we did hybrid SR48s that can run both tungsten and power for LED. And it was a hybrid system. And now we don't do that at all. So you have to sort of say, that just doesn't sound, unless you are in a really podunk place that's got no money at all, it's just not cost effective, and it's not educationally sound. Let them go. Well, the rockin' sounds of the Luminoids tell us that once again, you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on just about every podcast site out there. Check out our website at lighttalk.org, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast. That way, you won't miss a second of Light Talking Saturday.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
if you decide to litigate us, the Snoot Group, with the legal team of Watson, Leitner, and Beam, will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers and Sister, coming to you from St. Bart's, Gainesville, and the Lone Star State.
and be sure to join us next week when we talk about more lighting shenanigans and serve you more of our casserole of nonsense.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
We'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
Toodles.
Bye-bye.